The Brewster Buffalo, piloted by Henry Jr., crashed here on Mt Stanley. They found the remains of the pilot about 70 yards below the impact site. The identity of the aircraft that crashed here is still yet to be determined.
G'day folks, welcome back to another episode of All Things Outdoors. Now, last year I uploaded a video where I went on a camping trip looking for the site of a crashed World War II fighter aircraft which I found on the side of Mt Stanley. Little did I know at the time that the 80th anniversary of the crash of that aircraft would be coming up soon. Well, today is that 80th anniversary and I'm going up to spend the day with the pilot Henry Jr. and just to remember his service and his sacrifice to the Allies during World War II. So let's go and spend the day with Henry.
Now, according to the records and interviews from the day of the crash, when the first responders arrived on site where the crash had happened, they found the remains of the pilot about 70 yards below the impact site, which is just above me here, and I'm relatively close to that 70 yards away from the crash site. So Henry's body would have been found around here somewhere. They found remnants of parachute and other items, and which makes me think that he possibly even bailed out before the aircraft hit the side of the mountain here, but didn't have time for his chute to open, so he's unfortunately hit the ground. But the records and the interviews from the day are slightly circumstantial, so very hard to tell exactly what happened. Right then, let's continue up the slope and find the main body of the crash up there. I believe there's a big rock just up there, which the wreck was just to the right of from memory, so I'm going to head in that direction right now. Well folks, I'm back here on the site of the Brewster Buffalo crash that crashed here on the 1st of July 1942, and right now it is exactly 80 years later on the 1st of July 2022 to the second. The aircraft crashed here at 10:45 AM on the 1st of July 1942 and killed its pilot Henry Jr., a second lieutenant with the US Army Air Force. Now, details of the actual aircraft that crashed here are a little bit sketchy. I did mention in the video that I uploaded last year that the identity of the aircraft wasn't specifically known that crashed here. We do however know that it was a part of a group of Brewster Buffaloes that were intended to be delivered to the Dutch East Indies, which is modern day Indonesia, but unfortunately the Japanese overran that country prior to the aircraft being delivered. Now, I discovered that the captain of the ship that was delivering the aircraft to the Dutch East Indies had the foresight to divert his ship to Perth in Western Australia, where they consequently offloaded all of those aircraft, which were boxed up in crates, onto land, so that the US Army Air Force could use them. What they did was they actually turned 17 of those aircraft over to the Royal Australian Air Force, and they were actually used in photo reconnaissance, in various roles in Darwin, but quite a few of them were used in the defence of Perth, because Perth at the time actually didn't have any fighter protection, just in case there was a seaborne attack from Japanese. So it actually worked out quite well in terms of the defence of Australia. Now there were 5 aircraft of that initial group of aircraft that were going to be delivered that were kept by the US Army Air Force. They actually had a detachment called the 4th Air Depot Group, which had which had detachments that were based at RAF Base Wagga Wagga to the north of here, and also RAF Base Laverton. So those aircraft were reassembled at a tractor factory in Geelong, and at the time of the crash, the aircraft was being tested post reassembly. So Henry would have been flying between Laverton and Wagga, testing the aircraft to make sure it was working correctly. But the records that I had from the day state that a farmer just down the valley here at Barwidgee Creek noted an aircraft pass over at about 10:45 a.m. on the morning of the crash. It was very overcast and foggy, so he couldn't make out the actual aircraft, but he did notice that it sounded like the engine was having difficulties, and then shortly after he heard a loud crash and saw a column of black smoke coming up from this actual location. That farmer, I believe his name was G.D. Wood, then sent a telegram to the Myrtleford police station, where a constable, I believe it was First Constable William Miller, was the first to arrive on scene here. And when he arrived, he noted that there was the remains of what appeared to be a US military aircraft, and about 70 yards below the actual crash site, he found the remains of a US serviceman. Now, he did state in his statement that there were parts of parachute and, webbing and, Army-issued equipment that was surrounding the remains of the pilot. So it may even be reasonable to speculate that he actually bailed out just prior to the crash, but there wasn't enough time for his chute to open, and hence why the parachute was strewn all over the place. Or it could be that he did die in the wreck and the parachute was destroyed and strewn everywhere. So, but the fact that it was 70 yards below the wreck does seem to suggest that he might have actually bailed out prior to the crash when he saw the mountain approaching. So very interesting. Obviously we may never know the circumstances, but it's just interesting to speculate. Now, I did mention that the conditions on that day were very foggy and overcast, so it would have been very difficult to navigate through this type of terrain, especially when you're having engine troubles. But I mean, it's in stark contrast today. It's a beautiful, sunny, almost pleasantly warm day sitting here on the crash site. But I just wanted to take a moment just to sit and remember Henry and the sacrifice that he made in defence of Australia, and also helping the Allies win the Second World War. The pilot of the aircraft that crashed here was US Army Air Force 2nd Lieutenant Henry Orris Knoll Jr. of Los Angeles, California. He was born on the 2nd of October 1918 and was 23 years old at the time of the crash. Henry also had a brother, 2nd Lieutenant Robert Knoll, who was consequently killed in a Liberator crash in Papua New Guinea in the following year. The two brothers are buried side by side in a cemetery in Honolulu, Hawaii. Since my last visit to the site, I also learned some really interesting details about Henry himself too. So he had a really strong Australian connection. He actually got engaged to an Australian girl prior to his death, and they conceived a child. So Henry has Australian relatives. His son was born in December of 1942, and obviously went on to have a family of his own. And yeah, so Henry's got a really strong connection to Australia. But apparently, not so long ago, the family were able to get in touch with Henry's family in California, and they made a connection and actually met up some years ago. So it's really nice to see that come full circle, because I believe Henry's son wasn't told about him until he was about 16 years old. So yeah, really interesting to know that Henry felt such a connection to Australia that he wanted to get married to an Australian girl, and you know, he may have even settled here post the war if he'd survived. So really nice to see that people that came to defend our country felt such a great, strong connection to it. I thought it might be appropriate today, on the 80th anniversary of the crash, to placed the American flag here at the crash site in order to remember Henry and his sacrifice. This location is now actually our heritage site, so it's protected under the Heritage Act. So basically you can't remove anything from here, you can't prospect, you can't disturb it. You can come and look at it, but as I say in all of my videos, have a look but put the parts back where you found them so that we can preserve the site and preserve Henry's memory. But that's a really good win. That's what I'm always aiming for, is preserving these sites, which helps to preserve the memory of the men and women that fought and died in the service of our country. In the video that I uploaded last year of my adventure to this site, I mentioned that the only reason I found the coordinates for the crash site was through a geocache website where there was a geocache placed here at the wreck. And last time I was here I was unable to find the geocache. Well, I've actually just stumbled on it just now. I thought the most logical place for it would be this massive rock here that is literally 5 meters away from the wreck itself. And I found a cluster of rocks that didn't look like they were naturally formed there, so picked them up and there it was. Alright, we might write in the logbook here to say that we were here. 1st of July 2022, 10:45 AM. Exactly 80 years to the second since this aircraft crashed here. I came at this time to honour the memory of USAAF 2nd Lieutenant Henry Orisnold Jr., who died here in service of the Allies during World War II. I am making a short film about this crash. Well, so long Henry, mate. It's been great hanging out again. Rest in peace. Thank you for your service. Time to get back down the hill, folks.